Every single week, I seem to get an astounding number of questions drop into my inbox. So I thought it'd be a good idea to start doing some FAQs on this channel. And one in particular that I've had drop through a couple of times this week has been, Charlotte, do you have any hacks for CeMAP 2 and CeMAP 3? So I'm going to walk you through the top tips that I can give you for those two exams in particular. And if we start with CeMAP 2, now, as you probably already know, it's very similar to CeMAP 1 in a sense of it's 100 multiple choice questions broken down into units. But there are certain things that will help you with CeMAP 2. You need 70% in all of your units to pass, just like with CeMAP 1. The areas in particular that I would focus on would be auction properties for a start. So do you know the difference between your standard property auction and something called the modern method of auction? Really simply, one is done in person and one is done online, but they operate quite different. And the time frames that you have to exchange contracts and to complete are very different. Your standard property auction, you actually exchange contracts on the day. So what that means is you turn up to the auction on the day. If you are the successful bidder, you exchange contracts there and then. And you then have, I think it's 28 days to complete. Now, that is not a huge length of time. And the problem with 28 days is most mortgages, as you guys might know, won't complete in 28 days from the initial application. So a lot of people tend to have the funds lined up in some other way before they go into an auction. Now, you do have a little bit longer with a modern method of auction or the online auction because you have 56 days in total. The way that works is you have 28 days to exchange contracts and then another 28 days to complete. With your standard auction properties, you have to pay a deposit, and it's a 10% deposit based on the property value. But with a modern method of auction, it's not a deposit, it's effectively just an admin cost, and that is usually around 5% of the property value. There is a lot more on top of that for auction properties that you do need to cover. The good news is it's only a couple of pages of your textbook as well, but they seem to really hone in on it. So definitely make sure you've checked that out. As well as that, stamp duty is a huge one. And I am going to do a separate video on stamp duty because it seems to be a reoccurring thing that people struggle with. But when is stamp duty paid? How do you pay stamp duty? Who pays the stamp duty? All of those are potential questions across both your CeMAP 2 and your CeMAP 3 exam. So make sure you are brushed up on those ones. As well as buildings regulations. So there is a particular chapter in your CeMAP 2 textbook that focuses on things like buildings regulations, something called permitted development, which is basically alterations that you can make to your house that as long as they are within certain parameters, you don't have to go through the application process. You don't have to get planning permission with them. You need to know the distances. So a really common exam question is how far beyond the back of your building can a single story extension be on a detached property? It's quite a lot of information going on there because if it's detached, it's one distance, 8 meters. If it's a semi-detached or terraced, it's actually only 6 meters. But then if you add a second story into the mix, it's 3 meters, whether it's detached, semi or terrace. So a lot of people can get tripped up with those, understandably. There is also one on loft conversions, which comes up for quite a lot of people as well, both in CeMAP 2 and in CeMAP 3. So make sure you're hot on that one as well. But my biggest tip for CeMAP 2 and CeMAP 3, which I'll come on to in a little bit more detail, is life insurance and protection. You can get through CeMAP 1 having an okay knowledge of life insurance and protection, and you can still get a pass. You can't do that with CeMAP 2 and 3, and that's because you have a whole section in CeMAP 2 just dedicated to life insurance and protection, whole of life cover, term cover, critical illness cover, income protection insurance, all of that kind of stuff. In CeMAP 3, from experience, I would say that the biggest thing that gets people a pass with their CeMAP 3 exam is their life insurance and protection knowledge. And I would calculate based on a lot of student feedback that around 30% of your CeMAP 3 questions are going to be based on life insurance and protection. So if you feel like that's a subject that you're not particularly hot on, definitely brush up on it. I have a bunch of podcast episodes on it already, which you can check out. There's also a ton of free material in the free bits of my e-learning platform if you haven't bought it. So I'll link those in the show notes. Check those out as well. but make sure that you are hot on that for both CeMAP 2 and CeMAP 3. The difficulty with CeMAP 3, because it's not a tougher exam, it's not any different material, it's just laid out in a slightly different way. So a lot of people say to me, Charlotte, where do I study for CeMAP 3? Because I've done the CeMAP 2 textbook. Now what? There is no different textbook. Everything that you need for CeMAP 2 is everything that you need for CeMAP 3. So once you've sat your CeMAP 2 exam, actually you're ready to sit your CeMAP 3 exam. It's just laid out slightly different. You've got 60 multiple choice questions with CeMAP 3. It isn't broken down into units, so that means that you need 42 out of 60 in total to pass. You've got over 2 hours with CeMAP 3 as well, which is loads of time. And as well as life insurance and protection, you need to be hot on things like second charge loans. So a second mortgage or a mortgage with a different provider, but it's still a mortgage. It's still a form of secured borrowing. Bridging finance is a massive one. Now, you can get regulated and unregulated bridging finance, but you need to understand how long people can get bridging finance for, how the bridging finance application process works, what are the risks, what's the difference between open bridging and closed bridging. All of that stuff can come up in CeMAP 2, but they tend to focus more heavily on it with CeMAP 3. And finally, do you know what the support for mortgage interest loan is? Because that's a huge one in CeMAP 3. And do you know the difference between things like a further advance, a second charge mortgage, bridging finance, or an unsecured loan? Because they love to test you on those types of things as well. Now, remember, if you're studying for CeMAP right now and you are just using the textbook, there is loads of free material in this YouTube channel, on my other YouTube channel where the podcast is, across Instagram, TikTok, and you can sign up for 12 hours worth of free material, completely free, which I will link below in the show notes. But if you've found this useful, or if you have other FAQs that you would like me to answer, please leave them in the comments and I will catch you for the next one.